7% of women negotiate their first salary. 57% of men negotiate their first salary. That is a huge, huge discrepancy, and it's part of why we have a wage gap between women and men in this country. It also, regardless of your gender, it has an impact on your future. If you don't negotiate now, that affects the salary you go into your next job with. Graduate school is professional development of a very structured kind. It's credentialing. And for most accredited programs, there's a curriculum that conveys core competencies and theoretical fundamentals that are defined by a professional community. There may also be practical training. Adam, you and I were talking about that. There may be opportunities to apply your knowledge in practica or field work or hands-on projects that you do with a group in a class. So the 2 years or so that you spend in a master's degree program, you'll have a lot of professional development happening. That's the whole point of it. So the question is, how do you keep that going? How do you continue to develop? Well, first of all, like, professional development does not end when you graduate, right? Like, you have to keep learning. Nobody that I know that has a job has not learned anything in the time that they've had that job. Everyone everywhere is always learning something if they are doing their job well. So how and why do you continue your professional development when you no longer have classes you have to take or events you have to go to or a job that you have to get when you have a job, when you're sort of settled somewhere? What is the structure for this? So first and foremost, your job might require you to do professional development. There may be an expectation that in your annual review, you are going to present a list of all of the professional development activities you have undertaken in the last year, and there may be a minimum number. For academic libraries, that can be where librarians are considered tenurable faculty or tenurable positions, career track positions. There may be a very well-established rubric for you need to get, X number of points, and we assign points in this way. Attendance at a conference is 2 points. Presenting a paper at a conference is 5 points. Doing professional leadership, there may be very, very clearly defined calculations for that. There may be less clearly defined calculations, or there may be a plan that you set out with your supervisor at the beginning of the year, and you check in with that plan at the end of the year, and you see how you did, whether you met or exceeded expectations. You may have implicit requirements for professional development in your job. The work that you're doing may simply require you to learn stuff to actually do it. That happens, I think, for almost everyone. You might need to and it might be really kind of Mickey Mouse stuff, like, we're doing a desktop refresh and everybody's on a new operating system, or we're switching to a new email client and you have to learn new software applications. That does count. Anything that is improvement of skills and expansion of capacity does count in some ways. Some of it counts for more than others. And professional development that your job implicitly requires really might be ad hoc. It might be instrumental. It might be to a specific aim or for a specific project. It might be less structured and strategic. It might be just reactive rather than proactive. That's okay. It doesn't invalidate it. You'll take those skills and capacities with you when you leave. They won't necessarily be things that you're acquiring for a particular purpose that is larger than the job that you're doing. You may be able to apply them to those purposes later, but you're not necessarily thinking about that, thinking strategically about that as you're doing it. You may expect yourself to learn new things. I took a cake decorating class just because it had been a while since I learned how to do something new. I wanted to do something with my hands. And it sort of relates to my job. We do a weekly meeting in my department that's called the tea breaks. I always bake something. I realized I was sort of like plopping cake on a plate, and I was like, I would like for this to be like a little fancier and to show respect and regard in a semi-tangible way for the guests that come and talk about their work. Like, I don't want to just serve them cake. I want to serve them a pretty cake. And also, it seems like it would be fun to take a cake decorating class. So, so I did that. I would consider that. I would consider that skill building. It's not necessarily professional development, but I found that as I was working through the Wilton Buttercream Basics Module 1 course at Michael's Crafts, I was thinking a lot about how they structured those lessons and how that related to teaching other forms of craft knowledge and hands-on preservation work, splicing 16mm film or Super 8 film, assessing the physical condition of a collection. That also is craft knowledge. So you may do something that is for personal development that you find out is really applicable. Learning is learning. It's a muscle that it's good to flex. And so having some expectation for yourself that you're gonna learn something new every year is not a bad professional development goal to have. It doesn't always have to be, I'm gonna learn to write Python and do bash scripts and technical stuff. It doesn't have to be as specific as that. It can be something that you find more fun. But be thinking about how it applies to you as a professional, because whatever job you're doing, you are bringing yourself to that job. And the more you have to bring, the better off you'll be. Finally, and finally, you may just have to do it to get the next job. The job market may require you to develop professionally. If you don't want to be making lateral moves your whole life, relocating, taking essentially the same job at a different institution in a different state, if you want to kind of work your way up, you will probably need to retool, add skills, add capacity, get new stuff before you put your hobo bag over your shoulder and move on down the road. So professional development is going to be important, whether it's explicitly required of you or something that you just appreciate that you need. So, like we did before with networking, which of these count as professional development? It depends. The answer is always, it depends. Yeah. Every question that anyone ever asks, the answer is always, it depends. Yeah, it really depends on your goals. If you are an academic, if you're a tenure-track faculty member, writing and publishing, that's where it's at. That's getting grant money. That's a secondary thing. Teaching a class is actually kind of lower on the list. So understanding what counts in the position that you're in or the position you want to be in is crucially important. Having a sense, and sometimes that means having a conversation with your employer, with your peers, with colleagues in your department. Having a sense of what counts within your institutional culture, within the position that you're in is truly important. You may think that something is really important and you may put a lot of energy into it, and it may turn out that your boss doesn't care or thinks that's a waste of your time and is worried that you're not getting your real job done. So having a conversation about that, or talking about it in the interview process, what sort of professional development will I be expected to do or supported in doing? If it's not part of the picture where you are, you can build that in, or you can say, offer. I really believe in growing in my jobs, and I really would like to get, I feel like I'm strong in this area, I would like to get some strength in this area. I think that would help me in my role as X, and so it would be great if we could talk about maybe some financial support for that once I've established myself here. So teaching a workshop or class can be really great if you have started developing some skills but want to get better. There's really no better way to get good at something than teach others how to do it. And you'll ideally over-prepare, so you'll learn a little bit more, be more than one chapter ahead of your students. Professional service. If you want to be working in a different area of the field, volunteering or serving on a board can be a really great way to gain mobility, extend your connections, develop some new areas of strength. And presenting at conferences, talking about the work that you have done, that is rarely a bad thing to do. And it's generally a very good thing to do, but it's not universally good. And again, your workplace may simply not prize that, or they may actively discourage it if you're working on stuff that's confidential or proprietary. So there may be times where you just can't talk about your work. You might have to figure out other ways to leverage that. So how do you know what kind of professional development to do? You have a conversation, you ask what's important and prized, you do some inward looking. I highly recommend that even if you have a job, you keep an eye on the job listings. Keep a notebook or like a, I don't know, dream journal, vision board, whatever you want to call it. Jobs that sound interesting, even if they're 1 or 2 steps above where you want to be, think of them as a roadmap or a checklist. If it's a job that sounds a lot like yours, but the one that you currently have, but asks for a whole different skill set or specific software applications, abilities, capacities, highlight those and maybe add them to your to-do list. Reading other people's resumes and job descriptions, sometimes, you know, we don't, it doesn't even occur to us to ask, but one of my first jobs out of college was working with I worked in the director's office of the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. We were going through the ALA accreditation process and or getting reaccredited. And one of the things that we had to do, and this was so great, it would never have occurred to me to ask this of people, but all of the senior staff had to provide their resumes. We were putting together all these binders full of requirements for the accreditation reviewers. And so I got to read the resumes of all of the curators, the registrar, our head of interactive projects, and you know, Peter Sammis's resume was such an inspiration to me. This guy had done all kinds of different stuff. He had a degree from the Sorbonne. He'd gone to University of Michigan. Everything that he had in his personal history wasn't necessarily a linear trajectory, but it so clearly led to the position that he currently had. And like you couldn't imagine anybody else doing his job. And you could see really clearly where, you know, he'd moved from one place to the next, and each one sort of represented a logical progression or an advancement in some way. But it wasn't like, you know, getting on a train at one station and then getting off at the other. He'd kind of wander around a little bit. And I looked at that resume and I was like, that's what I want my job history to look like. That's what I want my career to be like. And I filed it away, and I used that for, you know, at least a decade as my model of like, you know, am I doing this? Am I getting where I'm going? It gave me confidence to not feel like there was only one choice after each job. It gave me the sense that when I was digital and media archivist at the Japanese American National Museum, that title kind of pointed in at least 2 directions, right? That I could go in the digital direction or I could go in the media direction. And my job after that, I did go into the digital realm. I became the editor and applications analyst for interactive programs at the J. Paul Getty Museum. And that, you know, that was not where I wanted to be forever. I was there for about 1.5 years, and then I jumped ship, and I realized I wanted to work more on the media side. I wanted to work with film again. So figuring out what you need to do to divert or to get to the next step, and not necessarily thinking of it as a linear progression, but, you know, strengthening new areas so that you can make that move. That comes a lot from reading job descriptions, seeing what's in demand, and thinking about, you know, really what matters to you. Asking people is also a good way. If you don't have access to other people's resumes, looking LinkedIn profiles are good proxies for that. But it's totally okay to ask somebody for their resume. Say, you have a job that I really love. I'd love to see sort of what your career progression has been. Do you mind if I have a copy? You know, do you mind sharing a copy of your CV? Finding models who aren't necessarily mentors, or asking people for stuff like that is really can be really helpful. And think about your job not just as your job, but your job as something that is eventually going to have a context in your larger career. So your job plus, like, here's my title, here are my duties. Take a step back from that and think about what is that helping you to become as a person, not just as a professional. When I started in the current position that I have at UCLA, we implemented a first-year review process for our master's degree students, and this is where I started using the 3 Ps. We asked students to submit a sample of the work that they'd done in the first year, at least 2 papers, one of which had to be from a required class. And we asked them to kind of reflect on what they'd accomplished and what they wanted to do in their second year of the program. And that the 3 Ps was a good focusing device. So projects, presentations, and publications. You didn't have to be doing all of those, but we did want people to be thinking about those in the context of their graduate program. But this is a useful structure to be thinking about your career planning personally, and to make this maybe something that you sit down by yourself or with your employer every year, or with a mentor or a peer, and maybe mutually talk this out, so you get some input on it and you do some strategic thinking. So projects, that could be digitizing a collection, it could be collaborating with another institution, writing a grant proposal, curating an exhibition or a public program, organizing a conference. There's all kinds of things you can be doing that will help you build capacity. They might be new for you. Maybe you don't want to organize a conference right away. Maybe you want to serve on a conference committee first, and then next year you organize a conference of your own. There are steps to doing all of these things too. And we can place these things on a continuum, right? Formal, informal, internal, external. So these are all things that you might be doing in the context of your residencies, right? The green things are publications, the blue things are presentations, the red things are projects. You can use a matrix like this to evaluate what you have already done, or what you've done over a specific period of time, maybe since graduate school or in the last year. Ideally, you want to be moving things towards that upper right corner, formal, external stuff, because that's the stuff that really stands out on your resume. It's the stuff that counts most of the time. Informal stuff isn't bad. It can be really crucial for networking, for getting your brand out there, tweeting, having a personal blog, having a personal website. That is definitely external. That's public facing. It doesn't have to be as formal as a peer-reviewed publication. It can be helpful, and it can be, in fact, instrumental in certain contexts. But generally speaking, if everything you're doing is internal and informal, you're probably not growing in the ways that you need to be to advance as quickly as you want to in your career. That make sense? Yeah. So, if you're down in that lower left corner, if you're just writing poetry and putting it in a drawer like Emily Dickinson, it doesn't mean that you won't be famous someday and recognized for your genius work, but it means that it's going to be very hard for people to see the value of what you've done, and it's going to be hard for that value to ripple out and really be effective for other people. So don't do like her. And remember that every job you're in is some kind of a sales job. When you're talking about your work, you are selling something. You're selling your accomplishments. Always be clear. First prize, Cadillac automobile. Second prize, set of steak knives. Third prize, you're fired. If you're unemployed, you're selling your services. If you are employed, you're trying to get your boss to approve your plans or your budget. If you're writing a grant proposal, that is a sales pitch to somebody who is going to buy your idea and pay for it. Donors, depositors, content creators, these are all people you are going to have to sell in some way. Conviction is sales. And we deal with that every day. Advocacy is sales. So working life is fundamentally transactional. You should be thinking really hard about why people should buy what you're selling. What is it that you're selling? What do they get out of it? Who's heard of the acronym WIFM? Anyone? What's in it for me? That is a question that the person you're talking to should always be able to answer. It should be really clear what's in it for them. If you're just going with well, I want this, or I need this makes a difference to me, you're lucky if you get somebody who's altruistic and supportive, but chances, you can't count on that. You can't make a career out of that. So really be thinking about how other people benefit, and always be closing. So we also have to negotiate. You know, they're not. There might be something in it for them, but it may cost more than they want to pay. You may need to work out how to meet in the middle. Um, who really likes negotiating here? Who thinks that's fun? Yeah. All right. Adam's into it. I'm into it because I see negotiating like this. It's gate crashing a wedding reception to like make the contact you need. It is negotiating done correctly is figuring out what you both want and getting there together. It's not screwing the other guy out of something that he has that you want or need. It's not getting what you want at the cost of everyone else's happiness. That is not negotiating. That's bullying. Negotiating is it's also just crucial for all of you as early career professionals, and it's particularly crucial for women. 7% of women negotiate their first salary. 57% of men negotiate their first salary. That is a huge, huge discrepancy, and it's part of why we have a wage gap between women and men in this country. It also, regardless of your gender, it has an impact on your future. If you don't negotiate now, that affects the salary you go into your next job with, and your next job, and your next job. And that stuff is cumulative, and the miracle of compound interest means that even if you are doing it exactly right and consistently contributing the maximum amount to your retirement fund, if that is always 3 to 7% less than it could have been if you had negotiated, that is going to result in a difference of tens of thousands, if not millions of dollars when you get to the end of your working life. So just negotiate, just ask. The worst they can do is say no. And most of us think of negotiation, especially around money, as something that is really taboo. It requires, talking about dollar amounts. I've talked to a lot of students, towards the end of the academic year when everybody's going on the job market, they freak out and they're really, really glad to get a job offer, and they don't want to negotiate because they think that the offer is going to be rescinded if they seem greedy or aggressive or they're asking too much. If you're asking too much for no reason, then if you're like, well, no, you shouldn't pay me that, you should pay me this because I want it. Nobody's going to respond well to that. But in the negotiation, in the hiring process, people expect negotiation to be part of that. Employers, their job is to offer you the least amount of money they think you will take. They are, if they're smart, prepared for you to ask for more. If you don't, that's kind of weird. Because you could get more, and they usually know exactly how much more you could get. And if you don't ask, they don't have to give it to you. I learned this when I took my first job out of graduate school. I had been working on grant-funded projects and had convinced them that they needed a digital and media archivist at the Japanese American National Museum, and that person should be me. And so my boss, got approval to create a new position, and we went into a separate room. We went into the document review room, which we never used as a meeting space. Like, we went into a different place, which was my first signal that this is something different going on. When you're negotiating your salary for a job, it's okay to feel like the people who are negotiating, it's not the person that you interviewed with. It's not the person that you're going to show up and do your job with. You are in negotiating mode. Like, you get to be different people, and you get to look after your own interests in that circumstance. And it's okay, to play hardball with cause. But my boss said, "Oh well, and he said, well, we need to talk about salary." And I was like, "Okay, well, what's the range you guys had in mind?" And he said, "Well, we were thinking mid-30s." And I was like, "Well, mid-30s could be 33 or it could be 37. And he's like, "Yes." And I said, "I would prefer it were closer to 36. And he said, "I can do that." But I realized later, he was not going to give me anything I didn't ask for. He couldn't give me something I didn't ask for. It was his job to go in there, and if I said 33 would be okay, like fine, like get my signature on 33. But because I sort of was like, I don't know, like this is weird, but like I don't want it. I want mid-30s to be 37, but 35 would be okay, but 36 would be better. And I just, I came out with an answer that got me, close to the limit of what he was authorized to offer. And I'm really grateful that I did that. It was one of the scariest things I've ever done. I was 24 years old, and I was asking for something that somebody didn't have to give me. So there may be occasions where, especially if you're applying for a grant-funded position, that salary is set. And a responsible employer will list that explicitly up front, but also be prepared to negotiate for other things, something other than money. So if you know the salary is set up front, don't assume that there is no room for negotiation, or that negotiation is not going to be part of your discussion before you sign a contract. Again, you don't get anything you don't ask for in this world. And so if you want a better parking space, or working from home one day a week, or extra vacation time, or the opportunity to be considered for a salary increase on an accelerated schedule, you can ask for all of those things. Professional development funds often come out of a different bucket of money in the budget from salaries. So asking for that in the negotiation process is part of the deal too. It's, career success requires negotiating. Even if everything has a price tag on it right up front, and the salary is set, there's a lot more that you could be talking about and asking for. So we're actually going to do a little activity that helps illustrate that. And I have 4 jobs. We're going to break out into candidate and employer pairs. The scenario here is that you are in the negotiation mode. You have been offered the job. Now it's time to talk turkey.
As you might know, I'm moving from a bigger city, so I'm going down. I'm expecting to go a little bit down in salary, but the cost of living here is lower too, so I'm comfortable with that. But I had been receiving about $5,000 a month previously. What at this time are you guys willing to offer?
We are prepared to offer a $3,800 per month salary.
Okay. 38 sounds good. But one of the things that I'm excited about when moving to a smaller place is to have a little bit more free time. I like camping, going traveling, things like that. So I'm wondering if I could negotiate to work from home some days, or to telecommute, do some work on the weekends, things like that, so I can take a little bit more time off.
Yeah. I mean, it's lower than 45. You don't have to get approval. So, awesome.
I guess I would discuss benefits or free perks, what might be available in that sense.
Buy yourself a bottle.
What's the problem here?
Really bad negotiator. So I'm job number 3, processing archivist. And I'm the candidate considering for a grant-funded position as a processing archivist.
What was the offer you got? What did you get offered?
Job number 3.
So it's $3,325 a month, and that's set in the grant. So
What was it that you wanted to be making?
At least 3,400, but a little bit more.
Yeah. So it's like 2% less than you wanted to make.
Because of all the transfers, but
Yeah.
I'm okay.
Yeah. So what things make a difference in your quality of life, in what you have to pay to live? Do you have a long commute? Are there, the first question I would ask in that circumstance is, what's the professional development? Yeah, because if you're getting an extra $2,000 a year to go to conferences that you might otherwise have to put out of pocket, that's more than the difference of, what is it, $75 a month?
But I definitely don't want to be like, yes, I'll take it. I should have more of a conversation, right?
What else? What else can you offer her? Do you have other things in your pocket?
I do. It's actually a pretty good deal. So I'm actually able to cover you for 2 to 3 conferences per year for attendance if you're presenting.
Yeah. So are you the employer or the candidate?
I'm the employer.
So we on board?
Yeah. Yeah, you guys, you were not set up for success on this one.
But we had a good conversation. Let's get to know each other better.
So I gotta think about it.
It's a good answer. It's a good answer regardless if it's not for you.
Yeah.
Let me think about it. Like, let them hang for a minute. So that they're happy about you saying yes if you do, but they're prepared for it if you say no.
Well, we did a lot of the
I don't know. It wasn't an
the
option.
salary offered was pretty low. It was like 20.
It's pretty low. It's
What were
22
you
a
hoping to
month.
make going into this?
Hoping, I think it was 3,300 a month, which is still kind of low, but
Yep.
but yeah.
It's good that you know that. Why is it low?
I mean, because that's like,
Depending on where this is, it's less than living.
yeah, seriously, that's like
Looking at your credentials.
Or a
almost
master's.
not even 40,000 a month. I have friends who work assembly line jobs that make like almost 50,000 a year. But I was kind of trying to bring it back more, not to kind of like I deserve more, but kind of like a, hey, you're expecting me to uproot a lot, like feasibly, you're not offering me a lot to work off of.
It's not a competitive salary.
Yeah, that's not something that I can, realistically expect to live off of.
Yeah.
So,
So in this scenario, the problem's not with you; it's with the grant.
Yeah, yeah.
And this may not even be your grant. This might be like, we got the money to do this. We got to hire some poor schmuck who's going to be getting paid a third less than market rate. Sometimes there's bread and circuses promises made. Like it's like, we're not going to pay anybody any money. The more prestigious the organization, the more likely it is that they're going to try to get you to consider the cultural capital of having that name on your resume as being part of your compensation. You shouldn't take less than you're worth just because you're working for some fancy pants place. Always ask for more. This is a yes and situation, right? To use the improv parlance. But you guys had a good outcome here, right? Like you got to something that you were both happy with, and honestly, the difference between the competitive or the matching offer of $4,300 a month and the absolute maximum that they were willing to go of $4,500 a month, not that huge a difference. Like if you'd found out about that, you would have been kind of bummed, but not as much so if you had settled for, what was your lowest that you were willing to go? 38. Yeah. So that's $6,000 a year difference. That's a lot. Also, I did hear you asking, what does that work out to? Like what's that per month? Go in know what the salary basis is, and go in prepared to do that mental math. Yeah, it's okay to whip out your phone and make those calculations too, and just say like, hang on a second, like I'm not so great with the mental math. Let me just like run through and like, oh well, that's sometimes saying it in those words, you can also change the basis of the negotiation. You say, you know what, you're offering $4,300. I was actually hoping to make something closer to $51,000. Make like turn it around, make them do some math. That buys you some time. It gives you a little breathing room as well. So stalling tactics, those are okay to use. If it can make the negotiations more concrete, if you understand the numbers better when they're phrased in one way, weekly, monthly, annual, that can be helpful. Yeah. So you've done your research on this, right? You've been looking at other jobs that are like this and what those salaries are. You've talked to your peers about what they're making. That can be really taboo. People don't like to talk about how much money they're making. But it's really crucial so that, because that's how the man keeps us weak, right? Is by making it uncool to talk about what we're making, whether we all work together in the same organization or work for different organizations. You know, you guys can ask me what I make. It's public knowledge. You can go on UCLA has to disclose salaries all the time, annually. So you can look up what I make, you can look up what Chris Horak makes, you can look up what every professor at UCLA or in the UC system makes. That I think is really liberating. It means that, you know, I can be truthful about what I'm making when I apply for another job. And that kind of information puts everybody on sort of even footing when it comes to negotiation. So yeah, ask your peers how much they make. It's very uncomfortable for many people, but it's the only way that you're gonna know if you're getting dicked, basically, or if your expectations are unrealistic. And those expectations should be set on other things like cost of living. You guys did talk about the fact that it depends on where the job is. Like if it's in Normal, Illinois, that's really different from if it's in New York City. But I've seen paid graduate internships that are offered at $19,000 a year in a major American city, and those are really prestigious organizations. And what they are offering you is magic beans. They're like, oh, well, you'll have worked for, you know, this is not that scenario, but like you'll have worked for the Getty or the Walker Arts Center or the Academy. You know what? That you can get a job at a D grade, you know, utterly unknown, just getting off the ground, community-based archive, and you can be worth a lot more. You can do stuff that's a lot more rewarding and going to be a lot more valuable to you professionally. Working for a name brand organization, if that's what they're selling you is just the privilege of working for a name brand organization, it's never going to be worth it if that's all they're giving you. You need to get paid what you are earning. You need to not give your stuff away. So, yeah. We can continue this discussion over lunch.